How good was Scott Steiner? In 2022, that question hung in the air at the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony. Scott stood beside his brother Ric. The crowd celebrated them. The Steiner brothers were finally home. They were legends being honored. The industry that once feared them now welcomed them back. Scott gave a gracious speech. He talked about family. He talked about loyalty. He looked at peace. The cameras captured him smiling. Ric stood close. The bond between them was visible. This was a moment decades in the making. A reconciliation that seemed impossible just years earlier. The man who once threatened Hulk Hogan's wife at an airport was now being celebrated. The wrestler who nearly took Diamond Dallas Page's eye out in a backstage brawl was receiving a standing ovation. The performer who publicly humiliated Ric Flair on live television was being inducted into the most prestigious hall in the business. But the wrestling world has never agreed on who Scott Steiner really was. Some called him a once-in-a-generation athlete. Others called him a ticking time bomb. Both were right. This is the story of how one man could be praised and feared at the same time. How someone could innovate moves that changed wrestling forever and also create backstage chaos that nearly destroyed careers. How a technical wizard became a brawling menace. How loyalty to family became both his greatest strength and his biggest limitation. The contradiction was not a bug, it was the feature. Scott Steiner made you choose a side. There was no middle ground with him. You either understood what he represented or you did not. You either respected the chaos or you feared it. If you're enjoying this deep dive into wrestling history, show some love by using the hype feature on this video. Your hype helps us bring you more untold stories from the legends who lived them. The legends who worked with Scott Steiner tell two very different stories. One story is about an athletic marvel, a heavyweight who could fly like a cruiserweight, a technician who mastered moves that should have been impossible for his size, a wrestler who came from the University of Michigan with legitimate amateur credentials, someone who understood the fundamentals of grappling but chose to defy them, someone who looked at the rules of what heavyweights could do and decided those rules did not apply to him. The other story is about a man you did not cross, a fighter who made the locker room nervous, someone whose temper could explode without warning, a person who blurred the line between performance and reality until nobody knew where one ended and the other began, someone who took professional wrestling's predetermined nature as a suggestion rather than an absolute rule. These two versions of Scott Steiner existed at the same time. They were not separate eras. They were not different phases of his career. They were the same person expressing different aspects of the same intensity. They fed off each other. The athletic ability gave him credibility. Nobody could dismiss him as just a character. He had real skills, real accomplishments, real athletic achievement. The danger made him compelling. You had to watch because you never knew what would happen. Together, they created something the industry had never seen before and has not seen since. A legitimate threat who could also deliver a technical masterpiece. A character built on real volatility instead of scripted anger. An athlete whose best performances came when he abandoned the script entirely. The split in opinion starts early. When you ask wrestlers about Scott Steiner's peak, they cannot agree on when it happened. Was it the early years when he defied physics? When he hit 450 splashes at 260 pounds? When he proved that heavyweights could work like cruiserweights? The Steiner Brothers era when they dominated tag team wrestling across multiple promotions? When they worked stiff and made believers out of everyone who stepped in the ring with them? Or was it later when he became Big Papa Pump and the whole world stopped to watch? When his promos became must-see television, not because they were good, but because they were dangerously unpredictable? When he grabbed a microphone and you genuinely did not know if he would cut a promo or start a riot? The answer depends on what you value. Do you respect technical perfection or raw chaos? Do you admire restraint or embrace the madness? Do you want a wrestler who follows the rules or one who burns the rule book? Scott Steiner gave the industry both, but he could not give them at the same time. The transformation from one to the other came at a cost, and that cost was paid in broken relationships, burned bridges, and years of exile from the biggest company in wrestling. Before the bleached hair and the chainmail, Scott Steiner was something wrestling had never seen. He came from the University of Michigan with real amateur wrestling credentials. That mattered in the late 1980s. Wrestling still valued that connection to legitimate grappling. The sport had not yet fully embraced the entertainment aspect. Credibility came from real athletic achievement. A college wrestling background meant you knew how to work. You understood leverage and positioning. You could be trusted not to hurt people. You had discipline. You had fundamentals. But Scott did not wrestle like the other amateur stars. He did not follow the path that Ric Steiner followed. He did not just mat wrestle. He did not rely solely on suplexes and slams. He did not stay grounded. He flew. At 260 pounds, he launched himself off the top rope like gravity had no claim on him. Peers watched in disbelief. How could someone that heavy move that fast? How could someone with that much muscle mass rotate in the air with such precision? The physics did not make sense. Big men were not supposed to do moonsaults. Heavyweights were not supposed to hit hurricane ranas. The industry had rules about what bodies could do. Weight classes existed for a reason. You stayed in your lane, you worked to your size. Giants did power moves. Cruiserweights did high spots. That was the natural order. Scott broke all of those rules. He made other wrestlers question what was possible. He made them reconsider the limitations they had accepted. If Scott Steiner could do a standing moonsault at 260 pounds, what excuse did anyone else have? The 450 splash debate tells you everything about early Scott Steiner. Most people credit lighter wrestlers for inventing that move in the 1990s. Wrestlers like Too Cold Scorpio, who weighed maybe 220 pounds on a heavy day. Smaller guys who could rotate faster, who could generate the momentum needed for a forward somersault. But evidence suggests Scott was doing it in 1987. He performed it for World Wrestling Association in Indianapolis. This was before the move had a name, before it became a standard high spot, before every cruiserweight in Mexico and Japan was attempting it. Wrestlers who saw those tapes talk about it like they witnessed something impossible. A forward somersault from the top rope, a complete rotation in the air, a landing that should have shattered both knees. From a man who weighed more than most cruiserweights could lift, it was unnatural. It defied everything wrestlers understood about body mechanics. It was decades ahead of its time. It was also reckless in a way that defines Scott's entire career. The move could have broken his neck, could have shattered his knees, could have paralyzed him, could have ended his career before it began. But he did it anyway, because the risk was worth it, because the reaction was worth it, because proving people wrong was worth it. His move set read like a highlight reel of near-death experiences. Standing moonsault slams that defied belief. The setup alone required perfect balance. You had to climb to the second rope while holding an opponent. You had to position them correctly. You had to trust they would not slip. Then you had to flip backwards while maintaining control of another human being. The execution demanded precise timing. One mistake and both wrestlers end up in the hospital, but Scott hit it clean every time. The margin for error was non-existent, but he never missed. Then there was the Steiner screwdriver, a move so dangerous that most wrestlers refused to take it. A vertical suplex lifted into a pile driver position. The person taking it had to trust completely. Their entire weight was balanced on their neck. One wrong move and the cervical vertebrae compress. Paralysis becomes a real possibility, but Scott had that trust. Opponents believed he would not hurt them, or at least he would not hurt them accidentally. The intentional hurt was a different story that would come later. And then there was the Frankensteiner, a standing hurricane rana that became his signature, the move that defined early Scott Steiner, the innovation that proved he was special. The move required him to jump onto an opponent's shoulders, flip backwards, and use his momentum to send them flying across the ring. At 260 pounds, think about that physics equation. That much weight generating that much force. The opponent had to catch him, had to hold him, had to allow themselves to be thrown. The trust required was immense. The physics were absurd, but it worked. He made it look easy. He made it look smooth, and he was protective of that name, intensely protective. If you called it just a hurricane rana, he would correct you, loudly, publicly. The move was his. The name was his. Nobody else got to claim it. That possessiveness would define him later. The need to protect what was his, to fight for credit, to make sure people knew who did it first, to make sure history remembered him correctly. Wrestlers from that era use one phrase over and over: what might have been. Those three words contain so much tragedy, so much lost potential. Injuries changed Scott's style. His body could not keep doing those moves forever. The human body has limits. Even genetic freaks have limits. The landings took their toll. Every moonsault compressed his spine a little more. Every Frankensteiner stressed his knees beyond their design limits. Every high spot deposited scar tissue in joints that were never meant to absorb that much impact. His back suffered. His joints degraded. The pain became constant, chronic, debilitating, so the high flying stopped. The moveset simplified. The technical wizard became a power wrestler. The innovator became a brawler. But even here, even when talking about his greatest athletic gifts, there is a shadow, a darkness that creeps into every conversation about Scott Steiner. The real story is not what he could do. The real story is how someone with those gifts still ended up at war with half the industry. How the most talented performer of his generation could not get out of his own way. how self-sabotage became his defining characteristic. The Steiner Brothers tag team built a different kind of reputation. They worked stiff. That term gets thrown around in wrestling all the time. Every generation has wrestlers who claim to work stiff, who pride themselves on hitting hard. But with the Steiners, it meant something specific, something different. It meant you were going to hurt the next day. It meant bruises that lasted for weeks. It meant the line between performance and combat blurred until you could not see it anymore, until you forgot you were cooperating. It meant every chop landed with full force. The sound echoed through the building. The welt appeared immediately. Every suplex had real impact. Your back hit the mat with genuine force. Every clothesline tried to take your head off. The Steiners did not pull their punches. They did not work light to protect their opponents. This was not malicious. This was not them trying to injure people. This was their philosophy, their belief system. Wrestling should look real. It should feel real. The audience should believe what they were seeing. If wrestling looks fake, it is fake. If it looks real, it can be special. Bill Goldberg loved working with them for exactly that reason. Goldberg came from football. He played defensive tackle. He understood physical competition. He respected toughness. He had no patience for wrestlers who wanted to dance around, who wanted to choreograph everything, who treated it like ballet instead of combat. He said his feud with Scott Steiner was electrifying. It was a stiff working match. It did not look staged. It did not look predetermined. The hits looked like they hurt because they did hurt. That was the entire point. Goldberg wanted that authenticity. He craved it. Most wrestlers did not. Most wrestlers preferred to protect themselves, to pull their punches, to work smart instead of hard, to go home healthy instead of going home hurting. The Steiners gave you no choice. You either matched their intensity or you got exposed. You either hit them as hard as they hit you or you looked weak. Kevin Nash talked about the physical toll of working with Scott. Nash was not a small man. He stood nearly 7 feet tall. He weighed over 300 pounds. He was a legitimate tough guy. He had been in real fights. He knew what real violence felt like, the difference between working and shooting, but he respected what the Steiners brought. He appreciated it even as it hurt him. They did not cooperate in the traditional sense. They manhandled opponents. They threw people around. They forced you to rise to a level of physical competition you might not be ready for. You had to match their intensity or get exposed. There was no middle ground, no half measures. The locker room learned quickly. If you stepped in the ring with Scott Steiner, you were in for a fight, not a dance. People respected that, the toughness, the legitimacy, but they also dreaded it, the pain, the recovery time, the risk. The respect came with fear. That became the pattern of Scott's career. Respect mixed with fear, admiration mixed with caution. This was the beginning of the fear factor, not the character, not Big Papa Pump with the chainmail and the sirens, not the promos and the muscles, just the reality of working with someone who treated every match like a shoot, someone who expected you to hit him hard and would hit you harder back, someone who took professional wrestling's predetermined nature as a suggestion rather than a rule. Someone who might forget this was supposed to be cooperative. The respect was real. Veterans acknowledged his ability, his innovation, his impact, but so was the warning. Step carefully around Scott Steiner. Do not make him angry. Do not give him a reason. Do not cross him, because he will remember and he will make you pay. Maybe in the ring, maybe in the locker room, maybe on live television, but he will make you pay. In 1993, Scott Steiner nearly became WWF champion. Most people do not know this story. It was buried for years, hidden in the what-ifs of wrestling history, lost in the alternative timelines that never happened. Bruce Pritchard and Pat Patterson pitched an idea to Vince McMahon, two of the most influential creative minds in WWF history, two men who helped build the Golden Age, two men who understood what made a star. They saw something special in Scott. They saw the future. They pitched him as the next breakout star. The plan was ambitious, audacious even. Scott Steiner enters the 1993 Royal Rumble as a surprise, a shock entrant. Nobody expects it. The crowd goes wild. The announcers sell it like the biggest moment of the year. Then he wins the whole thing. He eliminates established stars. He tosses out legends. He proves he belongs. He bypasses the hierarchy. Then he goes to WrestleMania 9 and wins the WWF World Heavyweight Championship, the biggest prize in wrestling, the dream every kid who ever stepped in a ring chases. The creative team was enamored with him. They saw the perfect synthesis of look, talent, and legitimacy. They saw someone who could carry the company. They saw the future. The plan failed for two reasons. First, Vince McMahon was not keen on it. Vince had his own vision for the company, his own ideas about who should be champion. Maybe he saw the brothers as a unit that should not be split. The Steiner brothers were already over as a tag team, already selling merchandise, already popping the crowd. Why mess with success? Why break up something that works? Maybe he doubted Scott was ready for the media responsibilities of being champion. The WWF champion had to do interviews, had to appear on talk shows, had to represent the company to sponsors and advertisers, had to be controlled, had to stay on message. Scott did not seem like someone who could be controlled. He did not seem like someone who would follow a script. Whatever the reason, Vince was not convinced. The pitch died in that meeting. The second reason is more revealing. More important to understanding who Scott Steiner was at his core. Scott and Ric wanted to stay a tag team. They turned down the push. They said no to the opportunity. They chose loyalty to each other over individual glory. This was not a small decision. This was not turning down a mid-card program. This was the WWF Championship, the top of the mountain, the spot that Hulk Hogan held, that Bret Hart would hold, that everyone wanted, the dream, and Scott said no, because it meant leaving his brother behind, because it meant breaking up the team, because it meant putting himself first. Some call that admirable. Some call it the ultimate expression of family loyalty, the kind of sacrifice that defines character. Others call it a ceiling they built for themselves, a limit they imposed when no limit needed to exist, a choice that cost Scott his destiny. This decision tells you who Scott Steiner was at his core. Family came first, his brother came first. The Steiner brothers came before Scott Steiner. Personal ambition could wait, glory could wait, championships could wait. That loyalty would define him for years. It would shape every major decision he made. It would influence when he finally did go solo. It would determine how he felt about the business. But it also meant he watched other wrestlers get opportunities he deserved. He watched politics and backstage maneuvering determine who got pushed. He saw talent take a back seat to who knew the right people. He watched people with half his ability main event WrestleMania while he defended the tag titles on the undercard. He watched people who could not do a fraction of what he could do hold the championship. That resentment grew. It festered. It turned into something dark and poisonous. It became the fuel for everything that came later. And when he finally got a microphone and creative freedom, when WCW gave him the power to speak his mind, it all came pouring out. Years of watching lesser talents get pushed. Years of seeing the wrong people succeed. Years of being held back. All of it exploded. The transformation into Big Papa Pump did not happen overnight. Nothing in wrestling happens overnight. It was gradual. A slow shift from one persona to another. A metamorphosis that took years. Injuries piled up. The body that once flew through the air started breaking down. The knees ached constantly, required ice after every match, required treatment, required medication. The back required constant care, adjustments, therapy, pain management. The moveset had to change. The Frankensteiner happened less often, then stopped entirely. The moonsaults became too risky, too painful. The landings hurt too much. But it was more than physical. The entire business changed around him. WCW started pushing edgy characters. The Monday Night Wars created a demand for controversy, for shocking moments, for water cooler conversations. Crash TV became the norm. Eric Bischoff wanted moments, wanted surprises, wanted unpredictability. Technical wrestling matches did not create those moments. Shocking moments mattered more than technical excellence. Scott realized his athletic purity was not enough anymore. He could hit a perfect Frankensteiner and the crowd would barely react. They had seen it before. They were desensitized. But if he grabbed a microphone and shot on someone, if he said something controversial, if he broke the fourth wall, the building would explode. Social media would light up. People would talk about it for weeks. He needed to become a spectacle, so he did. He made the choice to reinvent himself. The physical transformation was shocking, dramatic, impossible to ignore. He gained massive amounts of muscle, more muscle than seemed natural, more muscle than seemed possible. His arms became grotesque in their size. Veins bulged. Definition became extreme. His chest looked like it might burst through his skin. The change was too dramatic to be natural, too fast, too extreme. The accusations of steroid use were immediate. Fans suspected it, posted about it on early internet forums. Wrestlers knew it, talked about it backstage. Everyone knew. But Scott did not deny the accusations. He did not get defensive. He did not issue statements. He embraced them. He made the accusations part of the character. He called himself the genetic freak. He flexed and posed and dared anyone to question him. He made it a taunt. The honesty was refreshing in a way. Wrestling had always pretended its performers were natural, had always denied the obvious. Scott said the quiet part out loud. He admitted what everyone already knew. He made it part of the appeal. When he returned to WWE in 2002, management asked him to take a drug test. This was standard procedure for returning stars. The wellness policy was becoming more important. Public scrutiny was increasing. Sponsors were asking questions. WWE wanted to clean up its image, project a healthier product, so they asked Scott to take a test. Standard protocol, nothing personal. Scott agreed on one condition, just one simple condition. Triple H had to take one too. Triple H was the top star. He was married to the boss's daughter. He was the chosen one, the future of the company. He was untouchable, protected, above the rules. The request was dropped immediately. Nobody wanted to open that door. Nobody wanted to admit that the steroid issue went to the very top, that everyone was doing it, that the entire industry was built on pharmaceuticals. That story became folklore. It spread through locker rooms. It proved Scott was willing to burn bridges if he thought the game was rigged. He did not care about consequences, did not care about his job, did not care about future opportunities. He cared about fairness, or what he perceived as fairness. The principle that if everyone was dirty, nobody should be punished, or everyone should be punished equally, but not just him, not just the guy without political protection. The war with Ric Flair defined this new era. The heat between them went back to 1991, over a decade of resentment. Clash of the Champions 15, a time limit draw for the WCW World title. Scott Steiner versus Ric Flair for the biggest prize in the company. On paper, it should have been a star-making performance, a chance for Scott to prove he belonged at the main event level, a passing of the torch moment from the old generation to the new. But it did not happen that way. Arn Anderson later explained what happened, what Scott believed happened. Scott felt Flair sandbagged him during the match. Flair intentionally underperformed to make Scott look unready for the championship level. Flair worked slow, did not sell enough, did not make Scott look strong, protected himself instead of building a star. Whether that is objectively true does not matter. Truth is less important than perception. Scott believed it. He held that grudge for years, almost a decade of resentment building, festering, growing more toxic. He saw Flair as a politician who used his booking power to hold down the new generation of athletic talent. Flair represented everything Scott hated about the business. The backstage games, the protecting of spots, the refusal to let new talent rise, the manipulation. Flair had his guys, his friends, his chosen ones, the four horsemen, the people he protected, and Scott was not one of them. So Scott got held back. Or so he believed. The truth was probably more complicated. Politics always are. Flair probably did protect himself. That is what top guys do. But he probably was not specifically targeting Scott. He was just being Flair. But perception became reality in Scott's mind. The belief became fact, and beliefs drive actions. When Scott got a live microphone in the late 90s, he went to war. He declared war on Ric Flair. He shot on Flair in unscripted tirades. He attacked everything about the man. He attacked Flair's age, called him old, called him washed up, said he should retire, said his time was over. He attacked his physique, said Flair looked terrible, said his body was falling apart, made fun of his appearance. He called him an ass kisser, called him a politician, called him worse on live television. Things that cannot be repeated. The insults were personal, they were vicious. They were designed to humiliate, to strip away the legend and expose the man underneath, to destroy the mystique. Flair responded in his autobiography. The gloves came off completely. He dismissed Scott as a non-draw who meant nothing as a talent. He said Scott drew no money and had no legacy. That Scott would be forgotten while Flair's name would live forever. That history would remember Flair and ignore Scott. The hatred was mutual. It was public. It was ugly. It was real in a way wrestling feuds rarely are. Lance Storm offered a more neutral take. Storm was respected by everyone. He had no dog in this fight. He had no axe to grind with either man. He suggested the conflict was also stylistic, philosophical, a clash of worldviews about what wrestling should be. Flair preferred a specific kind of match. Storytelling over spots, psychology over athleticism, building to a finish instead of hitting moves, making the audience care instead of just impressing them. Scott was innovating a more physical, dangerous style, hitting hard, going fast, making it look real, making it feel real. The clash was not just personal grudges. It was a collision of two different philosophies of professional wrestling, two different eras trying to coexist. Old school versus new school, politician versus rebel, storyteller versus fighter, cooperation versus combat. But even when Scott had a point, even when his criticism had validity, he burned bridges in public. He made enemies he did not need to make. He chose confrontation over diplomacy every single time, because diplomacy felt like weakness, like compromise, like becoming what he hated, like selling out. The DDP incident crossed a different line entirely. If the Flair feud was a war of words, this was a war of physical violence, real violence, legitimate danger. It started with a promo on WCW Monday Nitro. Scott insulted DDP's wife Kimberly. She was a valet at the time, beautiful, popular with fans, the object of desire for the audience, and Scott made crude remarks about her, sexual remarks, disrespectful remarks. The words were unscripted, uncensored. WCW gave their talent freedom on the microphone. Creative freedom, sometimes too much freedom. The remarks humiliated her. They crossed the line from character work to personal attack, from kayfabe to real disrespect. DDP was furious. Any man would be. Any husband would be. Kanan said Scott had been bearing DDP and Kimberly in the locker room for weeks before the promo, talking trash to anyone who would listen, making jokes, making crude comments, disrespecting them constantly. The promo was just the public version of what he had been saying privately. When DDP finally confronted him, when DDP demanded Scott apologize or explain himself, Scott destroyed him, physically destroyed him. Buff Bagwell provided the chilling details. Bagwell was there. He saw the whole thing unfold. He watched it happen. During the fight, Scott gouged at DDP's eyes. He tried to blind him. He nearly took his eye out. This was not a worked shoot. This was not a planned angle to build heat for a storyline. This was not wrestling. This was real violence, real intent to harm, real attempt to injure. DDP went to the hospital. The injury was serious. He could have lost his vision. The locker room was horrified, but also not surprised. This was Scott being Scott. This was what happened when you challenged him. Rick Steiner was there during the fight. He watched his brother nearly blind someone. He talked about it later with a disturbingly casual tone, like it was just another Tuesday. He said DDP made a fatal error in judgment by trying to fight someone of Scott's caliber. Scott did what Scott does. That was the attitude, like it was inevitable, like DDP should have known better, like violence was just Scott's nature and you had to accept it, like challenging Scott Steiner to a fight meant accepting the consequences, and the consequences could be permanent. This incident cemented Scott's reputation as a shooter, someone who could hurt you, someone who would hurt you if you crossed him. The term shooter in wrestling means someone with legitimate fighting ability, someone who can really fight outside the context of a worked match. Scott had that reputation before, but this proved it beyond doubt, made it real, made it undeniable. The locker room got the message loud and clear. Big Papa Pump was not just a character. It was not an act. It was a magnified version of a dangerous reality. The act and the man had merged. You could not separate them anymore. The character was built on the real person. The real person fed the character. That made him compelling television, but it also made him a liability. Someone the office could not trust. Someone who might cross the line at any moment. Someone who might turn a work into a shoot. Someone who might actually hurt someone on live television. Rick Steiner defended his brother's transformation. Brothers defend each other. That is what family does. Rick said it was necessary. With injuries mounting and the business shifting toward characters and controversy, Scott had to reinvent himself. The athletic purity was not enough. The Frankensteiners and moonsaults were not drawing money anymore. We're not creating moments. We're not generating buzz. People wanted characters. They wanted promos. They wanted controversy. They wanted unpredictability. Scott gave them all three. He needed to become something bigger, something louder, something that demanded attention, something impossible to ignore. The Big Papa Pump character did that. It got him noticed. It got him over. It got him on television. It got him talked about. But it also came with fear and fallout. Every gain came with a cost. Every moment of attention created an enemy. Every controversial promo burned a bridge. Kevin Nash understood the psychology better than most. Nash was a student of the business, a master manipulator. He understood what drew money, what made people care, what made people buy tickets. He said Scott's intimidation of fans, referees, and opponents was frighteningly real. Not performed, not acted, real. His charisma and look gave him instant main event credibility. It was not an act. That was the appeal. That was what made it work. That was what made it special. When Scott grabbed a microphone, the audience stopped everything. Conversations ended. People turned to watch. They were not expecting a rehearsed monologue. They were not expecting talking points. They were not expecting something safe. They were watching to see what he would say next, who he might offend, what line he might cross, what bridge he might burn. That unpredictability was his weapon, his greatest asset, but it was also his curse, his greatest liability. Because once you build a reputation on chaos, you have to keep delivering chaos. You can never calm down. You can never just be normal. You can never just cut a regular promo. The character consumes the person. The expectations become a prison. In 2008, Scott Steiner gave the world a math lesson. The Steiner math promo happened in TNA Wrestling. The company was trying to compete with WWE, trying to create moments, trying to generate buzz. They needed viral content before viral was really a concept. The promo was designed to hype a triple threat match at the Sacrifice pay-per-view. Scott faced Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle, two legitimate tough guys, two men with real credentials, Olympic gold medalists, submission specialists. Scott launched into a frantic explanation of why he could not lose. The logic was absurd, completely ridiculous, but it was also strangely precise, mathematical in its madness, delivered with complete conviction. In a normal one-on-one match, each wrestler has a 50% chance of winning, basic probability, fair competition, even odds. But Scott claimed he was a genetic freak, not normal, not bound by normal rules, not subject to normal limitations. So his chances increased. He had a 66 2/3% chance of winning. That left Samoa Joe with a 33 1/3% chance. Already the math was questionable, but Scott kept going, kept calculating. He argued that Kurt Angle knew he could not beat him. Angle was scared. Angle was not even going to try. So Angle's 33 1/3% chance got added to Scott's total. His own chances plus Angle's forfeited chances. The final calculation gave Scott a 141 2/3% chance of winning at sacrifice. Impossible. Mathematically impossible. You cannot have more than a 100% chance of anything. But Scott did not care about limits, did not care about mathematical rules. Samoa Joe's chances dropped to 8 1/3%. Drastic senior. The numbers spelled disaster. The whole thing was delivered with complete conviction, absolute certainty. Like this made perfect sense. Like this was obvious. Like anyone who disagreed was an idiot. Samoa Joe has spoken about that promo with affection years later. Joe is a smart guy, thoughtful, analytical. He understood how absurd it was, how ridiculous, how mathematically impossible. But he also appreciated the commitment, the performance. He noted that despite the absurdity, the math was actually calculated correctly in real time. The addition and subtraction hold up. If you accept the initial premises, the rest follows logically. The internal logic works even if the foundational assumptions are insane. Joe also expressed amazement that no one on set broke character. Not interviewer Lauren Williams trying to keep a straight face. Not Petey Williams standing in the background. Nobody laughed. Nobody cracked. Nobody ruined the moment. Everyone committed to the bit. That is professional wrestling at its best. Selling the ridiculous with total seriousness. Making the impossible seem real through commitment. Kurt Angle embraced the meme. Angle is an Olympic gold medalist. He has legitimate credibility outside wrestling. Real athletic achievement. But he still respects what Scott brought to the industry. Still appreciates the moment. He quotes the promo at conventions. Fans love it. They recite it with him. Line by line. The irony is perfect. Poetic even. Angle was removed from the match due to injury. Could not compete. Scott's prediction that Angle would not even try became prophetically true. The numbers did spell disaster, just not in the way Scott intended. Not in the way anyone expected. The exile from WWE lasted for years. Long years of being unwelcome, of doors being closed. The heat came from multiple sources. His time in WCW created animosity, burning bridges with people who ended up in WWE. His reputation as difficult preceded him. Stories spread. People warned others. His willingness to speak his mind made him enemies in the office. But the 2015 incident sealed it, made reconciliation impossible for years. At an airport, Scott allegedly confronted Hulk Hogan's wife. The details remain unclear, disputed, but Scott allegedly made threats against Hogan himself. Serious threats. The police investigated, took statements, filed reports. WWE banned him from the Hall of Fame ceremony that year, made it clear he was not welcome. The incident highlighted the deep, lingering animosity Scott held for the politicians of the business. Hogan represented everything Scott hated: the ultimate politician, the backstage power, the self-promotion, the manipulation of who got pushed and who got buried. Hogan politicked his way to the top and stayed there for decades, used his creative control, protected his spot, held people down. Scott saw that as everything wrong with wrestling, everything he fought against his entire career. But time heals wounds in wrestling. It always does. The business has a short memory. Money heals wounds faster. Nostalgia makes people forget. In 2022, the Steiner Brothers were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. This required mending fences, required swallowing pride, required forgiveness on both sides. Triple H was now in charge of talent relations, eventually creative. The same Triple H who Scott had feuded with. The same Triple H Scott demanded take a drug test. The same Triple H who represented everything Scott despised about politics and wrestling, but they made peace. They had to. The Hall of Fame meant too much. Too much history, too much legacy. The grudges had to be set aside. The past had to be forgiven. During his speech, Scott was gracious, humble even. He focused on his family. He focused on Ric. Thanked the people who mattered. The anger was gone. The bitterness had faded. The need to fight had passed. He looked like a man at peace. A man who had made his peace with the industry, with his career, with his choices. The visual was powerful, emotional. Two brothers standing together, celebrated by their peers, by the industry they helped build. Braun Breaker, Ric's son, was there, representing the next generation. He is a current WWE superstar, carrying on the family name, the legacy continuing. Arn Anderson said the Steiner legacy lives on through Braun. He called Braun a hoss, strong, powerful, athletic, intense. He said Rick and Scott were hosses before it was popular, before the term existed. They set the template for the modern power athlete. The combination of size, speed, and intensity. That template still works today. Every developmental wrestler studies the Steiners, watches their matches, learns from their innovation. How good was Scott Steiner? The question echoes through wrestling history. Good enough to nearly win the WWF Championship in 1993 when Bruce Pritchard and Pat Patterson saw his potential. Good enough to innovate moves that are still used today by wrestlers who do not know where they came from. Good enough to make Bill Goldberg call him his favorite opponent. Good enough to terrify DDP in a real fight. Good enough to make the whole industry stop and watch when he grabbed a microphone. Good enough to get inducted into the Hall of Fame despite burning bridges for 2 decades. Despite making enemies, despite crossing lines, the talent was undeniable. The impact was real. The legacy stands. Complicated but real. Not tidy but lasting. The numbers truly do not lie. They spell a legacy that is 141 2/3% unique.